Hi people, it's me, Anja. My pronouns are she and her, and welcome back to my channel for a new recent reads video. I mentioned in my last recent reads video that August started off as a not great reading month, which continued to be true for the middle of August as well, but the end of August I read a lot of really great books, so let's talk about them. And also, in August, I ended up reading 40 books, which is so great and so satisfying. But anyway, the first book on this list is called The Feeling of Falling in Love. This book is a YA contemporary that follows a transgender main character who recently ended things with a previous friends with benefits relationship and decides to fake date his roommate for his brother's wedding. I hope that makes sense. For those who don't know, this book is written by the same author of I Wish You All the Best and The Ghost We Keep, two books that I rated 4 stars, so naturally I had really high expectations for this book, and honestly, it lived up to those expectations and exceeded them, and honestly, I think that this book is my favorite by the author. But anyway, this book was so good. Initially, I was hesitant because it's set over such a short amount of time. I believe only 9 or 10 days. But the romance was so well developed and it was absolutely so lovely. I usually don't love enemies to lovers, but enemies to friends to lovers, it was so cute, and it was also a T for T romance, which was also so wonderful. The representation in the queer joy in this book was so good. The plot was so intriguing and so engaging. The characters were so distinct, and the main character honestly reminded me of the main character from Kiss and Tell, which is a very high compliment since Kiss and Tell is one of my favorite books from this year. The family dynamics in this story were so authentic, and honestly, I would highly recommend this book because it's absolutely so awesome, and like I mentioned, it's my favorite book by this author, which truly says a lot if you've read previous books by them. But anyway, all that said to say, I would highly recommend this book. The next book on this list is called A Taste of Magic. This book is a middle-grade urban fantasy that follows a young black magician who uses baking skills to save her school, and this book is written by the same authors of The Wings of Ebony YA urban fantasy duology that I read this past year, if I'm not mistaken, or maybe I read it in the first 6 months of this year. At any rate, this is the author's middle grade debut, and honestly, I didn't like this book as much as I was expecting because it read on the younger side of middle grade for me, and that tainted my whole experience of reading the book. Although, as I was evaluating my final thoughts, I tried to separate that because honestly, the world building was pretty interesting, the plot was intriguing, and the characters definitely have a lot of potential. However, I personally didn't love this book as much as I was really hoping to because, like I mentioned, it read on the younger side of middle grade, which isn't really my cup of tea, but I understand why other people love this book and really enjoy it. And also, this book reminded me of a Molly and the Night Brothers, but in that same way, I won't be reading the sequel to this book, if that makes any sense. So without any further ado, I rated this book 3 stars, and I don't exactly recommend it. The next book on this list is called Belladonna. This book is a YA gothic fantasy that follows a young girl who pales with death to help with a murder mystery. And this book is written by the same author of the All the Stars and Teeth duology, of which the first book was one of my favorites of 2020, and the second book was one of my most anticipated 2021 new releases. But this book in particular wasn't one of my most anticipated releases of 2022 because sometimes when authors debut, their debut books are so good, but then their next books aren't as good. So I was kind of hesitant to put such high expectations on this book. But anyway, I rated this book 4 stars because it was absolutely so good. First of all, the atmosphere was so lovely and so wonderful, and it honestly reminded me of similar books like Gallant and A Far Wilder Magic. The plot was absolutely so engaging and so intriguing. The characters were well developed and distinct, and the romance was absolutely so interesting. Literally, this book is so good, and I'm so excited to read the sequel, which I believe is called Foxglove, next year. This author deserves so much more hype because this book is absolutely so good and it's so well done, and her writing is so lyrical and so good. So anyway, all that to say, I rated this book 4 stars and I would highly recommend it. The next book on this list is called Seton Girls. First of all, there's a trigger warning on this book for sexual assault, sexual harassment, and racism, so please keep that in mind before you read this book. This book is a YA thriller that follows a young black main character who starts to discover that the football team in her town and their 13-year win streak isn't exactly what it seems to be. I literally love this book so much because, first of all, the culture of the town was created so authentically and so well done. I typically don't love it when authors have flashbacks within their story because it makes the timeline so confusing, but in this story it was literally incorporated so well, and we love to see it. The plot was so engaging and so intriguing, the characters were so well developed and so distinct, and the friendships were absolutely so lovely. The subject matter was dealt with literally so well, and it hits so close to home. This book reminds me of Off the Record, you know what I mean, and other YA books that have dealt with this subject matter. So anyway, all that to say, this book is absolutely so amazing and it's so emotional, and I rated it 5 stars because, first of all, it made me cry, and second of all, there's nothing that I would change about this story. This author is absolutely so talented, and I will gladly read more from them. Literally, this book is so good. I rated it 5 stars, like I mentioned, and I would highly recommend it. The last book on this list, and certainly not the least, is called 3 Strikes Summer. This book is a middle-grade historical fiction that follows a young girl during the Great Depression who finds her voice in a tale of determination, strikes, and baseball. I know that's a rather vague synopsis, but I don't know exactly how to summarize it all very quickly without spoiling anything. But anyway, I really like this book because, first of all, the plot was so engaging and absolutely so intriguing. The characters were well developed and distinct. The world building was so great. And the book kind of reminded me low-key of Yonder in a way. If you didn't know, Yonder is one of my 5-star favorites from this year. This book reminds me of why I love historical fiction so much. First of all, I love historical fiction because at the core of it, it's educational. This novel shines a light on a difficult period of American history, but also, it also highlights old time, and it's very relevant to today in modern day because it talks about standing up for what you believe in and at what cost. That's so relevant. You know what I mean? This book is absolutely so good, and I love all the characters. They're all so individual and so authentic. The family dynamics were literally so well done. The relationship between the main character and her sister was so wonderful. This book is absolutely so good, and it's so underrated, which I know I say a lot on my channel, especially about middle-grade books and historical fiction books. But anyway, this book is so good. I rated it 4 stars, and with that, I would highly recommend it. So, in conclusion, my favorite book on this list was definitely Seton Girls, since that's a new 5-star favorite for me this year. And my least favorite book on this list was, unfortunately, A Taste of Magic, because that's the book that I rated the lowest on this list. But overall, I would say that August was a pretty good reading month, since I did manage to read 40 books. And I did read a lot of really good books at the beginning of this month and at the end of this month, but I wish that I had read more quality books in the middle of this month, if that makes any sense, because the majority of the 40 books that I read this month were pretty mediocre and 3 stars, so I hope that September is a better reading month in terms of quality over quantity, because I'm trying to unlearn the idea that the quantity of the books I read is more important than the quality, so hopefully I'll DNF more for the rest of this year. So anyway, all that to say, I hope that you enjoyed this video, and if you did, please don't hesitate to give it a big thumbs up. Comment down below the books emoji if you made it all the way to the end of the video. Thanks for watching, subscribe to my channel if you're new, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye!